Okay, looks like it's going live. Okay, I believe we're live. I'm just making sure, as we always do, that all of this wonderful stuff is working. I am going to the J. Wilkes Facebook page and making sure that we are showing this wonderful video that we're doing. We might as well make sure, if we're talking about this, that certain people can see us. I think that would probably be important. And there it is, we're live. I'm going back to Zoom and it's official. It is absolutely official. And welcome, Mark McPhillips, one of my high school buddies, just tuned in from Sierra Madre, California. May I introduce you to our director of winemaking for the Miller Family Wine Company, Mr. Jonathan Nagy. So I've known Jonathan for at least 20 years, because I think I remember the actual year that you came on at Byron, because I was selling grapes to Ken Brown at the time. But I should also say, welcome everybody. It is June 26th. It is a Friday. And if you aren't day drinking right now, I feel sorry for you. So let's get right down to it. What do you got in your glass, Jonathan?
I've got some Pinot Blanc from Pinot Macedo, J. Wilkes.
Well, I'm going to have to jump in and join you there. And I'll start it right off and give you your first question. It's going to be a great conversation. We're going to be talking about a couple J. Wilkes wines. We're going to answer some questions. We got a lot of people out there, both in the Facebook side and that are going to tune in, that are very interested in all the wines we produce. We've been selling a lot of Smashberry, a lot of Ballard Lane, a lot of Barrel Burner. So this audience has been incredibly supportive of the wine since the quarantine. Well, duh, what else are you going to do? So stay home, drink, have fun, love your family as much as you possibly can. So I'll go ahead and throw this first question out as I open this delicious bottle of J. Wilkes Pinot Blanc. This is the 2019, because I have some special sort of connections that I was able to get a bottle of this, and wait until you try the 19. 18 is a little atypical because we had to buy some of that wine back from Jed Steele, who barrel fermented it and went partial mallow on it. So for the first time ever since I came on, at least in 15, there was a little bit of mallow and a little bit of neutral French oak influence in the 18, which makes it, I think, a touch more atypical. I think the 19 goes back to exactly where I want the Pinot Blanc to be. So welcome everyone who's watching. Welcome, Jonathan. Super excited to have you on Day Drinking. Welcome to the family. Welcome to the Miller Family Wine Company since 1871, baby. So we got some history here. I know since you took over for Ken Brown as winemaker at Byron, first brand of Pinot Noir that I actually remember drinking and thinking, wow, Byron was my seminal wine of the New World. I drank, it must have been probably a late 80s, early 90s. Version of I just believe the Santa Maria Valley Pinot Noir. And that was the wine that was served to me that got me interested in Pinot Noir. So that's just a little aside. I was like, damn, that's good. Talk to me about your journey from sort of school, your decision to become a winemaker, maybe a little bit about your relationship with Ken Brown, who I call our own David Lett. Tell us sort of the story about Jonathan and how you got here.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So I was actually a chemistry major at UC Davis, and I didn't even know there was a wine drinking department, or else I probably would have been there. But I did happen to take a viticulture class just because I needed units and a requirement. And I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. It's neat stuff, but never really kind of considered it as a job path. Found myself in a position where I needed one class in the spring, and I had nothing for the fall and the winter. So in my young 23-year-old brain, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I worked for a winery and they laid me off right when ski season started? And that's exactly what I did. But I went to a job fair at Davis, which was a good place to be. I gave out resumes to a bunch of wineries, and Robert Mondavi actually called me back. And I had no idea who Robert Mondavi was or what kind of icon.
Called you?
not him himself, but the winery, and they called me in for an interview. And so from there, they offered me the job. So I worked a harvest in the lab at Mondavi back in '96. Liked it so much just because it was a fun group of people that I came back and did another harvest in '97. They actually offered me a full-time job and I said no. I moved to the Central Coast and I was going to get my teaching credentials at Cal Poly. But by that point in time, the wine bug had kind of bit me a little bit, where I realized I couldn't afford the wines that I really want to drink. So I took a part-time tasting room job at Cambria Winery, just so I could get the discount and just so I could, go on the weekends and taste for industry, the free deal. And it was there that they were like, wow, you have a BS in chemistry and harvest experience. Why don't you come run our lab for us? And a good friend is like, not everybody falls into the wine industry. Maybe this is something that you should pursue. So I was like, yeah, I could always go back to school. And I think it was one day where I was down in the cellar and I was stirring barrels, where I'm like, they pay me to do this. This is so much fun. Just going from barrel to barrel, just stirring barrels. And I think it was really kind of at that moment where I'm like, this is a really neat industry. This is a really cool product that we make. And I think it was right about that time that my grandfather passed away. And it was something that wasn't a big surprise. But, the family we all went up to Oregon and we were in the hotel room before like the rosary and my mom pulls out a bottle of Cambria wine that I was part of the winemaking team because I was in the lab. She opened it up and those little plastic cups that you see in the kind of motels, we all toasted grandpa with the wine that I had made in the plastic cups. And I went, that's cool. We get to be a part of people's lives, both good and bad, celebrating. And if that's what wine is all about, like, I want to be a part of it. So I think those were the defining moments where I was like, yeah, I want to be a winemaker.
Right. And then when did you meet Ken?
So Ken hired me in 2001. I'd been the enologist at Cambria for a couple of years, and he hired me as assistant winemaker in 2001. And that was just an amazing experience. And as well as I do how meticulous Ken is in the vineyard. And he really instilled in us, and I say us because of the people that have worked for him over the years, that if you don't get, especially Pinot Noir, if you don't get Pinot Noir right in the vineyard, you're not going to get it right in the winery. As a matter of fact, we always say our full-time job is trying not to screw up really good grapes.
Would you agree from a Pinot Noir perspective that when the farming's right, it is an extraordinarily easy grape to work with in the winery? Everyone always tells me, maybe it's just because the only red wine I've really made for the first 20 years of my professional career was Pinot Noir. Everyone's always like, oh my gosh, Pinot, how do you do it? I'm like, it's walking the field every day. It's talking to my guys every day. It's fine tuning the cultural practices that we do in the vineyard. Let's kind of vibe a little bit on Pinot Noir and what Ken taught you.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I think if you get the vibe in the vineyard, it's going to direct what you do in the winery. And I think that's kind of part of my winemaking philosophy, is letting the grapes kind of dictate to you how the winemaking should be, and having enough bandwidth of winemaking experience to appropriately shape and form and walk with the grapes turning into wine and what they're actually going to become.
Yeah, no, and I like the fact that you didn't say wine makes itself or wine is made in the vineyard, because I strongly believe that once you've worked with a vineyard long enough, and I think the fact that our vineyards that you're going to be working with, Solomon Hills, Bien Nacido, so close to, Catherine's and, basically the Byron Vineyard and Nielsen and all these wonderful historical vineyards are really very, very close to each other. How different do you think, can you imagine, half a mile distance maybe between the vineyards you've been using and the vineyards you are going to be using? Is it going to make a big difference? What do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially because I've been working with Bien Nacido and Solomon Hills for quite a few years.
Yeah.
But I think in Santa Maria Valley, it's interesting because the way the vineyards are, they go east-west, and that's the way the valley goes. And that's the way the fog burns off. And I've you could be at the Byron Vineyard, Nielsen Vineyard, and the fog burns off at 9. And then at Biennacido, it burns off at 11. And then out at Solomon Hills, sometimes the fog just hangs out. And that really shapes and impacts those vineyards, as well as the way the soils differ when you go from vineyard to vineyard. So definitely big differences, even though it's the same valley.
It's confounding just how different even like sometimes just the rows are in Pinot Noir. I mean, it's so interesting because of the geology and everything, and the way that most of our places where we're growing grapes in the Santa Maria Valley are alluvial. But then you look at Biennacido and it's a totally different critter. I mean, there's volcanic soils, there's limestone, there's actually limestone, there's calcareous shale, there's even some schist. I mean, it's kind of mind blowing just how complex the soils are there. So I think if any vineyard in the Santa Maria Valley, because I would say in the Santa Maria Valley, you could probably argue that there's a lot of easy farming. There's a lot of flat farming. There's a lot of sort of alluvial farming, deep soil farming, and farming that you don't have to risk your life on a tractor. That's not always true. There's certainly places in Biennacido that are sandy and deep, but it's going to be pretty amazing. I'm hoping in 20 years I'll have my head a little bit wrapped around what Biennacido can do, but it is. I always say I don't know if Biennacido is the methadone for my Clopepie addiction, or if Clopepie was my methadone for now my Biennacido addiction. But how lucky have I been that the vineyards that I've really kind of hung my hat on over the last 25 years have produced such beautiful fruit. So next one, I got a question for you. What skill, or this is a little bit off topic, we're going to get to know you as well as your wine. You're not expecting this question. What skill or talent do you possess that very few people know about?
I was pretty good at basketball back in the day.
Did you ever play at the high school level?
Yeah, I played at the high school level, and then got to the point where you can be good, but tall and quick outdo good.
Well, like I said, I've got a good outside shot. I'm a decent shooting guard. I can play point guard. But when I set a screen, I'm ready to take an elbow and lose my glasses. Yes. So we'll shoot around sometime, socially distanced or after we're
right.
So you're moving from a label famous for high quality and value cool climate wines out of Santa Maria Valley with older vineyard holdings, just like the Millers and Biennacido. But you'll be overseeing the production of a number of warmer climate elevation wines from Paso Robles Highlands District, like Zinfandel, like Lagrein. What can your history as a winemaker bring to bear on making wines, obviously from the cool climate we know about? What are your thoughts about your skill set moving on to make wines? Have you made wines from warmer climates, and how do you see this process moving forward for us?
I know it's kind of funny that you asked that, because when I started at Byron, we also had another brand called IO, which specialized in Rhone varieties all throughout the Central Coast. But we also were owned by Mondavi, so we had a partnership with Southcore. And so we were actually making wines from the Camada Hills Vineyard in Paso Robles, in the Shandon area, when I started at Byron. So we got Syrah for ourselves for the IO program, and then Merlot and Cabernet, and we're working with some of the different varieties. So I got a great experience, and especially working with some of the Australian winemakers, Ian Shepherd and people like that, Simon Graves, who's still farming the property right now. So he's South African. He would kill me if I said he was Australian. But just, I got to gain a lot of experience from them about making these varieties. So really excited about working with fruit from Paso Robles Highlands, which is really different because it's way on the east side. But I think those varieties don't scare me because I've worked with them before, and I think it'd be kind of fun winemaking wise, because cool climate winemaking and warm climate winemaking are right brain, left brain sometimes, and I think I love the challenge.
So is the creative right brain the cool climate?
Good question.
I'll just leave that out for people to imagine, but that's going to be fun. What varietal? I'm going to ask you a tough question. What varietal are you most excited about working with at Miller? And what varietal might? Let's just start with, what are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? Well, like I said, working with the vineyards that the Miller families have. I mean, the obviously I've worked with Biennacido, I've worked with Solomon Hills, working with French Camp. I'd never been out there, and when I started, I've been out there a couple times, and just to see how cool that spot is. You know when you get into a vineyard and it's a cool spot, like you get a feeling where I can admit I've been Santa Maria, Santa Barbara County bound, and I'm like, Santa Rita Hills is the place, and Santa Maria Valley for sure. I just wasn't expecting what I was gonna feel and get in French Camp in the Paso Robles Highlands. I was like, wow, cool. I like this, and so that's what I'm looking forward to.
It's so remote. The thing is like, you can be in downtown Paso, 12 miles as the crow flies from French Camp. It'll take you 40 minutes to get there. Like last time I drove out there, I saw 7 rattlesnakes. And I'm a snake freak. I love my snakes. I love them, love them, love them. I wanted to get out and play with them and say hello and take some pictures, not really pick them up or harass them, but just to appreciate their beauty and danger. Love them danger noodles. Yeah, no, it's a remote place. Clearly the Millers did not buy French Camp for ease of access. Wow. I would say 80% of vineyards are purchased and developed because they are in a place that is accessible to the drinking public. Some places like Clopepi that just happen to be on 246 end up being extraordinary. Then there's places like the old Kargasaki vineyard, while it was still being farmed competently, that you have, that was out in the middle of nowhere under a huge, sheet of diatomaceous earth. So it really makes a big difference. But I love going out to French Camp. I just don't like driving out there. So this is something I've always been curious about too, and I'm sure some of the folks. And we've got a nice little group of about 25 people over watching on Facebook. So thank you all the folks on Facebook, appreciate it. And then if you guys have any questions, feel free to type them, and I'll try to keep my eye out for any questions. Or you can come over to the Zoom side and ask a question directly. Take us through the day in the life of the director of winemaking during harvest.
Okay. Well, I think the day in the life of a director of winemaking in harvest and out of harvest starts with communication, and so that's the real key thing. So during harvest, it's about communicating with the vineyard team to see where the grapes are and actually going out and walking blocks. But then it's coming into the winery, and we have a great team in the winery, as well as a great winery crew with so much experience. It's pretty amazing and humbling to be around people who have been doing this for like 20 years. Yeah. So it's about relaying the information of the grapes coming in, what we need to do, what needs to be done, and keep the processing going. So I think first and foremost, it's communication.
So when you get into your office in the morning and you open your computer or you do whatever, is it going to be typing out some emails, checking some ripeness reports? Is it going to be more about checking data, calling people, and then getting out to the vineyard, tasting the fruit, looking at the vines, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think even more than that, it's every morning meeting with the production team. And you were talking with Roxy the other day. So every morning she kind of talks with the crew about what the plan is for the day. So it's being part of that meeting and just kind of maybe interjecting on kind of the bigger picture type things. And from there, I go to the emails and probably to the vineyards right after that. Checking fermenters obviously is part of the deal, but yeah, I think first and foremost, it's just keeping the lines of communication open to where we're all on the same page.
From being a cellar intern to being director of winemaking, what do you miss about being a cellar rat? What were you able to do as a cellar rat that you just can't do as a director of winemaking?
Zone out and do the Zen thing at work.
Or just
Yeah, just
drive the forklift.
be just be and where director of winemaking, end of the day, wine quality is is what we need, and so there's a little bit of responsibility to that, where the Zen thing doesn't really dive with that all the time.
Were you dirtier when you were a cellar rat when you went home, or are you dirtier when you're a director of winemaking? I mean, are you one of those? Because I always see like the Eddie Bauer commercials with the winemaker, like with perfectly clean clothes, like reaching over a barrel, pulling out some wine with a thief. I've never been that guy. Do you still get to get your hands dirty?
Yes, but I think as an intern, or as a cellar rat, I was dirty with lees, where now I'm dirty with dirt because I'm in the vineyards and I smell like sulfur a lot from being in the vineyards.
Sulfur was basically discovered as a house sterilant in about 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, when they had bugs or rats or problems in their house. What they learned is they could burn crap loads of sulfur within the house. And when they came back after they opened the windows, everything was dead, everything was sterile. That's the reason why we first started burning sulfur into amphorae, to actually desiccate them. And as a result, as a complete mistake, like ivory soap or white Zinfandel, we actually added free sulfur dioxide to the interior surface of the ceramic. So when we filled it with wine, the wine actually traveled better. So I love the idea that smelling like sulfur, it takes us back thousands and thousands of years, because especially areas around volcanic vents, that yellow sulfur deposits was so important to their culture. So I can't stop myself talking a little bit about the history of wine.
So you heard it here, folks. Sulfur against COVID-19. Winemakers aren't going to get it. Drink wine because there's free sulfur in there.
I'm smoking sulfur every night just to protect myself. I'm kidding. Trust science. Trust thriving. What were you most proud of in your 20 years at Byron? Maybe that's a wine. Maybe that's meeting your beautiful wife. Yes, obviously those things are important. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what were you the most proud of?
That I started one day before she did. No, I'm just teasing. Actually, the thing I was most proud of is there was a period there where I was just become the winemaker, and we went through 4 ownership changes.
Wow.
And one of them involved a 9-month bankruptcy. And during the whole time, we were able to keep the crew going, and we were able to still make wines that represented Byron and represented what Ken had always done and what the brand represented. So, and to have gotten the brand through that point, that transition.
Was that around 08?
Yeah, it was started in 05. 04, 05, and then went into 2006. Actually, there were rapid changes. It was Mondavi, Constellation, Legacy, and then Jackson Family. But I think it's rare to go through changes like that and to be able to keep like the crew, and like I knew their families. I knew I just to be able to keep everybody together and keep things going. I think I'm proud of that.
Awesome. And it's the Pinot Blanc, and what I like to call Pinot Blanc is the official sort of, I don't know, it's sort of like foreplay in wine. I just popped the Pinot, and I think the 18 is drinking so beautifully. Love the fact that the J. Wilkes Pinot Noir is under oaked. The North American Sommelier Association, NASA, I know it's a terrible name, but it's a great name at the same time. I'm a huge fan of space exploration. They use this wine and have used this wine since 2015 vintage to show their sommelier students what Santa Maria Valley is supposed to taste like as a standardized wine that really gives that sense. I don't think this wine doesn't require a big French accent for legitimacy, which I think is sort of one issue I have with Pinot Noir in America. The greatest Pinot Noirs have so much new French oak. Is it really about the vineyard? They talk about terroir on one side of their mouth, and then they put 100% new French oak on their wine. Are you comfortable with this level of juiciness and oak, or do you think this wine would be improved with a little bit more toast and a little more oak influence?
I'm always very judicious about oak in general. And that's one of those, going back to one of the things that Ken always taught us, was you make the wine in the vineyard and you want it to express the vineyard. So if you can put oak into a wine and it enhances that expression, that is a good thing. But the minute the wine, into what your point was saying, the minute the wine becomes more about the oak and less about the vineyard, you've overdone it. And each vineyard is different. I mean, there are vineyards that don't like a lot of oak, and there are vineyards that would, or varieties that could soak it up. So
Brian Babcock once told me you can't over oak a wine, but you can underwine the oak. I think that might have come also from Mel Knox, who probably gave the greatest. And if your kids are around, I'm about to use one 4-letter explicative. Mel Knox, when he found out that Bruno D'Alfonso and Chris Curran got married, do you know what he asked Chris online? So why would you buy the bull when you can get the shit for free? I'm just saying, I thought that was a pretty good line. We have a lot of home winemakers and a lot of small production winemakers that are constantly with some of the best viewership within this show. Do you have a secret for Pinot Noir? I mean, if you said you had to distill everything you know about Pinot Noir into one little or something you know about Pinot Noir that you've learned. Pinot Noir obviously is a wine that a lot of home winemakers can't make. They can't get the fruit, or they can't grow it where they are. But say we do have a few people who watch that have little home vineyards in Santa Maria Valley. One actually got permission from the city to put a vineyard in one of those little drainage ditches in the neighborhoods, which I think is just awesome. But is there anything that you can share about your experience with Pinot Noir that might help people that want to understand it, or or may try to even make it?
yeah, I think the thing is, Pinot Noir is a delicate variety, but when the grapes come in and it's fermenting and it's in the fermenters, you can be a little more aggressive in the fermenter on the front end with Pinot Noir and not be concerned. But then once it's a wine, once there's alcohol, and so I'm always of we're pretty aggressive in the fermenter on the front end. And then by the time you're in barrel, that's when you're doing everything by gravity, and you're just being as gentle as possible. And I think if you don't be somewhat aggressive on the front end, you don't get the extraction and the flavors and everything that you're trying to capture from the vineyard. And so and I think that's why Pinot Noir is a hard one to understand, because its needs change from stage to stage.
And I would say, to me, I would describe that as saying, whatever you do to a wine, and this is it, right? I mean, what we probably both learned. I spent some time in the extension program of Davis, probably with some of the same folks that were teaching you. But what I always learned, both from my Davis and from Brian Babcock and everyone else that I've worked for, as far as it seems to be a consensus, that you can make any generalization about wine. Wine, it's important where the grapes come from, and then you can just add a very, 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 if it's Pinot Noir. So the vineyard matters, and in Pinot Noir, the vineyard matters very, 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 very much. So anything that you're used to talking about with wine, you can just add very, 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 and add Pinot. Where I was going with that is, what I say is, if you make any addition of water, addition of acid, addition of sugar, my feeling is if you make that addition after the wine has started to ferment, you've probably made a mistake. Would you agree with that statement?
I would. Yeah, I would. And I think with Pinot, and obviously I've been, like you've been very blessed with working with great vineyards where adding water hasn't been an issue. So that one gets a little bit tricky if you're going to be doing that, because there is that dilution factor. You could always draw off a Saignée to balance what you're going to add back if you're going to do that. I'm thinking from a home winemaking standpoint. And then, but yeah, once things start fermenting, making those additions, you should have done it in the front end.
Yes, I completely and totally agree. So talk to me about why the Santa Maria Valley is so special for making wine. What gets you excited about when we're talking about the Santa Maria Valley?
Well, it's a couple different reasons. Yeah, we always talk about, well, in the wine community, we always talk about it's an east-west running valley, but that east-west running valley, the Alaskan current comes down, and we've been out. Clarissa has wanted to go for a hike on the Guadalupe Dunes on Mother's Day, and yeah, it's really cold. We last for like 15 minutes, and it's because that Arctic current's coming down and the wind's picking it up. And so just that factor of that coolness year round when the vines are growing and during harvest and everything, I think is an exciting factor because of, again, we're so far south that we've got an early bud break. So our growing season goes from, February 14th all the way until October or November sometimes. So we have one of the longest growing seasons arguably in the world. And then to top that off is what you talked about earlier, is the soils. Very sandy soils in general, but we have these outcroppings of different things, shale, schist, you named it. And so I get excited about our dear friend Gillian that you and I are friends with. She calls me a rock licker. And yeah, I do lick rocks. Like an exciting rock from an exciting vineyard, I want to know what it tastes like, because I know that helps the environment of where the vine is growing and then translates to what the wine, not directly, but indirectly.
Yeah, no, to me, I mean, Santa Maria Valley, not only was it the second AVA in California and the third AVA in the United States, but it just represents to me the heart and soul of Santa Barbara winemaking. Before, I remember being, establishing the Santa Rita Hills and like, how can we steal a little thunder from Santa Maria Valley? Because we always like, dude, if we could be as cool as the Santa Maria Valley, we would be so stoked. And then we ended up getting sort of the geek ball rolling, and Santa Rita Hills became the exciting new place. And I remember the first day that I was under full-time employment from the Miller Family Wine Company, I was invited to go to a Santa Barbara County Vintners meeting that was a taste-off, a smackdown between Santa Maria Valley and Santa Rita Hills. So I went there. I was still on the board of Santa Rita Hills. I was still on the board of the Santa Barbara County Vintners. And I sat there thinking, what the hell am I going to say about these wines? And so I stood up, and everyone knows that sometimes I have a hard time not speaking. So I gave myself the shortest. We went around the room and introduced ourselves. And I gave the shortest introduction of myself ever. I'm like, Wes Hagen, conflicted, and sat back down. And I actually got a pretty good laugh because I was that day. I mean, we're talking about, the vine age of Santa Maria Valley versus the new Dijon clones in Santa Rita Hills, the wind influence, the sand influence, all of these different soils. But I think the areas, without getting too far into it, and let's make this a quick one, but I've made the statement before that I don't know the difference between the Santa Rita Hills and Santa Maria Valley because of the age of the vines, the trellising, and the clones. That when we have the same trellising, the same clones, and the same vine age, maybe in 50 years between the average vineyard in the Santa Maria Valley and the average vineyard in the Santa Rita Hills, then we're going to be able to start talking about the difference between the real differences. Because I think the differences right now, quite honestly, are driven quite a bit on early trellising technology in the Santa Maria Valley catching up, and the newer vertical shoot positioning trellising really going off in the Santa Rita Hills. Any comment?
Having just recently in the Byron days had the honor to work with lots of killer vineyards from both Santa Maria and Santa Rita Hills. What I started telling people, I was like, okay, it's not a us versus them. Like, you don't say it's DRC versus Bone Mar. Like, they're both awesome, but they're very different. And so Santa Rita Hills, Santa Maria Valley, they're Grand Crus of California. But what I did see is the differences in soils and the differences in aspect, and where the aspect is. I mean, Santa Maria is basically a riverbed that goes down straight to the ocean, and then you have the outcroppings on the sides. Where Santa Rita Hills, Santa Rosa Road goes like that. So you got all this diatomaceous earth, and then you have all those really extremes And so there are always going to be different wines for that reason. But I agree with you. There's going to be some catch up that happens from one region to the other. But I think it's going to be driven by soils and aspect. And it's exciting to see that play out.
I think Santa Maria Valley will always be a little juicier. I think Santa Rita Hills will always be a little bit more grippy and intense. Generally, I have this weird theory about wind that I won't totally get into, but I strongly believe, and actually Tyler from oh goodness, I've completely lobotomized myself. Made a great statement that he believed that the wind going over the skins of the grapes will actually reduce the temperature a little bit in the Santa Rita Hills, because the wind intensity is probably 20 to 30% on average, probably a little more stomatal closure. I think.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Because the vines are going to shut down in the wind, and the vines are really not going to do much photosynthesis in the fog. So, I'll go back to Bill Wathen, that we have the laziest vines in the world. They wake up foggy, go back to sleep till 10, wake up at 10, do a couple hours of work. Oh shit, here comes the wind. Oh, that's 2 4-letter explicatives. I apologize. I usually limit myself to 1. But the idea that that our vines really moderate themselves, and that we have not only one of the longest growing seasons, but part of that growing season and the length of it is the fact that we have fog in the morning and winds in the afternoon, which slows down the process and gives us that wonderful, wonderful intensity of flavor and concentration at a slightly lower alcohol. Is there a challenge? Whenever I'm making Santa Maria Valley wine and I feel overwhelmed, I look at the weather in Burgundy. I look at the weather in Alsace. I look at the weather in Champagne. I'm like, oh, glories of glories. I don't have to worry about rain. So if we were doing this forensically, I would say, that we've agreed that Santa Maria Valley is an easy place to make wine compared to many other places in the world. Is there a challenge to the Santa Maria Valley? And if there is, what do you think it is as far as making wine in Santa Maria Valley?
I think the two challenges are, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's the fog. When we have those years where you have the really wet fog, then botrytis and mildew are an issue, and they will always be an issue in Santa Maria Valley. And so that's always going to be something that we're concerned about. Again, we're not going to compare our problems with other people around the world. And then the other one is the really cold springs. So a lot of times when we have bad set in Santa Maria Valley, it's because we have that intense wind, and then just the flowers just don't set. Yeah. And so yields will always be an issue, and rot pressure will always be an issue.
Yeah, I would say, early shoot blight, botrytis, the strongest powdery mildew pressure that I really know of. I'm thinking also, it can be a struggle deciding when to pull the trigger, because you have the option. Do we want to, I remember, unless you got 100 degrees coming in like 2010, 2004, where you just got to get the fruit out of the field, do you want it at 23.8 or do you want it the next day at 23.9? Is it a problem? Hell no, but it actually gives us the opportunity. We both know that when we pull the trigger and say we are picking tomorrow, that dictates the potential quality of the wine that comes out of the field. We can tweak, we can play, we can use different yeast, different barrels. There's a lot of things we can do in the winery, but I think we both agree that in a perfect world, which we live in Santa Maria Valley, that we should be able to make wines year in and year out without having to manipulate them, because we live in such a beautiful place. And that in itself is a challenge.
I would agree. Yeah. Rain making my picking decisions makes my picking decisions really easy.
Yes, or here comes the heat spike. It's funny because you can always just expect the young winemakers. They're all putting in their picking dates before the heat spike, and then all of us who know that everything's cool, put some water down. It's not going to completely freak out. Represented in the greatest way in the fact that Bruno and Chris go to the Santa Fe Chili Festival at the end of September every year and refuse to pick one grape, regardless of vintage, before that. So Santa Maria Valley, Santa Barbara County is a pretty magical place. All right, tough question. You get to keep one varietal at Biennacido and one varietal at French Camp in Paso Robles Highlands District. I know you're just getting to know French Camp, so I'm going to ask you the tough one. Which varietal do you keep at Biennacido, and which varietal do you keep at French Camp?
That's hard. My heart at Biennacido says Pinot Noir, but it's really Chardonnay.
You're right, dude. If that was a speed round question, you would have just won a beer.
Did I get a 0.5 on the speed round question?
I'm gonna add, just you get 5, it's gonna go to 6, and you get the prize. You're absolutely right. Chardonnay is the best grape we grow in Santa Barbara County.
And I think over the years, just it's world-class Chardonnay. It's world-class Chardonnay that has ageability and shows well worldwide and goes against some of the greatest Chardonnay grapes in the world. And I would say it's Chardonnay.
I love bringing Santa Barbara Chardonnay to Burgundy because it is so atypical that it's sort of like, California Chardonnay is to Santa Barbara the way Australian Chardonnay is to Margaret River. It's just a completely different critter. And I love that about that. Quick aside, we had a question from one of our home winemakers, Nick Profacci. Nick lives in Gardner, New York, and he grows hybrid varietals, mostly out of Cornell, but also out of the University of Minnesota. He says, is it completely profane to blend Pinot Noir? He makes a really nice Noir blend from Caro Noir and Pinot Noir that he buys from California. What do you think about blending Pinot?
In his situation, I would say it's not corrupt because I think sometimes our situations ultimately we want to make the best wine possible. So in that situation, he's making the best wine possible. Now, if I'm making a Biennacido Pinot Noir and I decide to blend in 15% Syrah, I'm not doing justice to the Biennacido Pinot Noir because the Syrah would overtake it. So I think every situation is a little bit different. In general, in Santa Maria Valley, where we've been very blessed with great vineyards, it'd be 100% Pinot all day. But yeah, that situation is pretty unique. That was a good question.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to talk a little bit about your philosophy on Santa Maria winemaking, sort of step by step. What do you think as far as, is there a general perception in your mind of how much new oak should be used? Maybe between Pinot Noir, we'll just keep it to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. We're going to keep the stainless steel nature of the Pinot Blanc, I'm sure. But are there specific barrels or percentage of new oak that you kind of have in your mind as sort of a go-to for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir out of the Santa Maria Valley?
Yeah. And I think every vineyard's a little bit different. So some vineyards can soak up the oak a little bit more than others. But I think with Chardonnay, I've always been a very big fan of Demy. They're spicy. They go really well with the just the character, the unctuousness of Chardonnay in Santa Maria Valley. And over the years, I've actually, with Pinot Noir, I think Francois Frere has actually been good, but Mel's not on this, right?
No. As far as I can see, no. But we've got a good crowd over on Facebook.
But very, very lower amounts. It adds some smokiness, which adds to the Santa Maria Valley Chinese 5-spice, which I think you always get out of the Pinot Noir. So at low levels, that smokiness really kind of rounds it out. At low levels, I'm thinking 15, 20%. And so I take the whole avenue of gonna layer in the oak as much as possible without overriding what the region or the vineyard is expressing.
I totally agree with Demy barrels. I've always tasted wine and seen them in wineries, but the first time I actually got to smell a brand new Demy barrel was with Nikki Nelson. And she's like, pull that and smell it. And I just smelled it. And maybe it's because Nikki's so damn beautiful. And my wife agrees with me, so I have no problem with that. That the fact that I was with a beautiful woman who taught me about a brand new barrel, and I got to smell that demi barrel. If you've never put your nose in a brand new demi barrel or a new Francois Ferrer Allier or Tronchet, you really owe it to yourself to understand that amazing flavor of oak. Okay, so put you on the spot. I want perfect ripeness in Santa Maria Valley for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. I would throw out, I like 24 at 3.2 in Chardonnay, maybe 25 at 3.4 for Pinot Noir. What would you go with?
Oh, I'm going with, how does the berry taste and how does the vine look?
Oh, you're gonna shame me now. Now I'm gonna be Jean-Luc Picard or his dad eating the fruit.
Yeah, it's always been a double-edged sword where I like numbers to back up what I'm seeing and tasting. But in 2011, we picked everything from like 20 to 22 because the vines were shutting down, and then all the rain came. And then there have been years where I pick at 24, 25 because the pHs aren't, and you can taste it in the grape. So I think that the numbers are good because they make me feel good. And also there's correlation of what's going on and what can correlate into the winery. But end of the day, it's how does that grape taste and how do the wines look? And it's
and the sort of a quick follow-up question: at what point in Brix, and Brix is basically the percentage of a weight of sugar in a grape for all the folks out there, and most white wines are picked between 22 and 24. Most red wines are picked between 23 and 26. I would say is a pretty decent expression in modern California. What number in Pinot Noir, when you see the reports coming back, makes you start thinking, man, I wish is there a number that kind of freaks you out, or do you know that water and acid can fix most problems in Santa Maria?
That's a good question. I think I've been on all sides. And so if I see something that I don't like, I don't freak out about it because I do know that we can make adjustments in the winery. And so I think when I started this, numbers would freak me out, either low or high, both directions. And I've been able to be comfortable in, if I can sit back to did it taste good? Did the vines look good? That's the overriding. And then we can deal with situations like that. And it does happen where you need to let the grapes gain flavor ripeness. And so the sugar ripeness goes up, and then you're like, okay, we'll have to deal with that in the winery. But so,
do you like to play with native yeast?
Yeah, most, and again, I'm talking about Byron. Most of my, Ian said 30 plus. I'd start freaking out at 30 plus Brix, but that's port.
It's funny because I always told Brian Loring as his grower that we didn't really agree stylistically, and I always said, oh, pick your grapes when they're ripe, but you don't need to make them overripe and add water and acid. Water adds are a fail. And he was like, dude, one day. And in 2010, I was driving back from the winery after picking the night before a bunch of fruit at 28.5 that soaked up to 30.5. And he saw in the back of my Dodge Ram, I had like 17 empty, Arrowhead 5-gallon bottles. And he drove by me in his BFD, which is the big, truck. And he was driving by and he stopped. He looked in the back. He looked at me and he nodded. He said, "Welcome to the dark side." And at that moment, the wine that we made out of that, we decided to make a reserve, that wine called the Dark Side. That was the richest, ripest, most overwrought wine that we made. And when I brought it to the first tasting, I apologized for it. I'm like, I know it's 15% alcohol. I watered it down, but I didn't want to water it down so much that I would ruin the nature of the vintage, which was ripe and rich and over the top. So I apologize. I normally make restrained Pinot, but here you go. I was at the wine house. I got mobbed. That was the highest scoring wine I had ever made. And I felt it was a kind of a little bit more of a Barbie than a ballerina. So, vintage matters. I think that's important. Anything you want to, as far as blending, and I think this will be the last question on this question, is blending in Santa Maria Valley. Are obviously we're talking about wines that are generally going to be 100% varietal. Sometimes the Pinot Blanc might have 5% Albarino. We've put in, I think, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. What are you looking for when you're blending a Santa Maria Valley wine for completeness?
I think I think timing of blending is another portion too. I try to leave things in barrel or in tank as long as possible on the lees, because that lees breaking down brings the richness, which is a little bit hard winemaking wise because the wines get closed in. They go through kind of an awkward phase, but you know that once you blend that or you rack them off the lees to bottling for blending, final blending, they open up. Now, as far as varieties, everything's kind of varietally pure, but I do like a little bit of Pinot Blanc and Chardonnay. I think that's kind of a Burgundy thing. So,
Do you know that Romani Conti had Pinot Blanc, 10% Pinot Blanc until 1956?
I read that in Wine and War. That was pretty cool.
The clad strips, man, that's good stuff. Excellent. I've got two last questions for you. Then we'll jump into the speed round, and then I will check to see if we have any questions that we haven't answered. This is a very important question and a very difficult one. What makes you happy?
Time with family and time with friends, time like this where you spend time with people makes me happy. And with my family, it's like when we travel, that makes me happy because we're forced to spend quality time together and then we reflect about that times. So that makes me happy.
Tell the world about your wife, Clarissa, because she's a very important winemaker in Santa Barbara. And I find her wines to be absolutely charming. If you're going to spend a minute to sort of pitch Clarissa and her label, tell us about it.
Oh, well, Clarissa's consulting winemaker at Riverbench, which they do fabulous Chardonnay, Pinot Noirs, and sparklings. Like,
The bubbles are
very
awesome.
impressed with their sparklings. And then she has her own label, C. Nagy, which she's got a tasting room here in Orchid that does things like Pinot Blanc and Viognier and Syrah and Pinot Noir. So yeah, I just she and I both share a passion for the area, which has been pretty cool because our roots are growing here. We're in the community, and the community is part of the wine community, but it's part of the community in general. And so it's been fun to have somebody who's a partner in that. And plus she makes great wines, so I get to drink great wines all the time.
And wines it's different to make a wine that you made, and it to a certain extent drinking a wine. And I would say that I tend to prefer wines made by women just because maybe they have an evolutionary advantage with higher taste bud density and a larger olfactory lobe. I've just always felt that in general, male winemakers are kind of like female linebackers. It's possible, but what the hell? Like, we don't actually have like the physical capacity to have the same ability as women winemakers. So
she's got a way better palate than I do, and sensory is what she studied in school. So that was like her passion. So yeah, for sure.
So Chanda's the same way. She humbles me. She's like sitting across the room 30 feet from me, is like, is that wine you just opened corked? I'm like, honey, it's Diem. No, but no, she just has an amazing ability to smell. Last official question is, do you have a seminal wine that changed your life or made you a winemaker? Was there a wine that just stopped you in your tracks, like the Byron wine from my youth, or 1972 Louis Trepet Chapelle Chambertin for me?
Yeah. Okay. Well, since you had two, I can have two too. As well. But now, yeah, no. Chris Curran actually gave me a bottle of Sanford and Benedict when Bruno was there. Well, Sanford and Benedict Pinot Noir, and I think I was watching a movie and I opened up this bottle, and I had to pause the movie
Wow.
to like look at the glass and go, oh my gosh, this is good. It's probably the first Santa Rita Hills Pinot I'd ever had. And it was when I was working at Cambria. And so for me, I was like, that solidified I could do this. Like, this could be something that could be a part of creating. And I went, wow, I could be a winemaker. That would be amazing. And then I think the other one would be Gigal Lalone. I mean, that wine is just, I was with Ken and with some friends, and we were at dinner and we were talking about Syrah, and I was like, can I just be by myself, please? Like, I just want to enjoy this wine by myself. So yeah, those are those moments.
No, and it's so incredible to have something that changes your world. And that I always said, and I remember a moment I had when I first, I think, had a sort of opening of my mind to what art means. I was at the Musée d'Orsay on the second floor, looking at the Monets, and I was looking at a Monet, and I lost my stuff, and I started crying, and I had no idea why I was crying. And I was alone at the time. I was away from the people I was traveling with, and I came up with this because I had a notebook and I was actually writing a poem about the experience of understanding art. And I came up with the idea that great art is so perfect and simple. It tells us you can be an artist. The greatest art in the world, I think the final message of art is, by observing it, you think, I could have done that if I had taken the time and had the skills and the craft to produce it. And so when I taste those early wines, Ken's wines at Byron, as well as Louis Tropez's wines from 3 years after I was born, it was that moment where it's like, I want in, and it's not like I want to recreate this, but I want the chance to make a wine that stops someone in their tracks and says, this is nature, this is craft, and maybe even a little art. This is a moment, and I think that's important. Okay, are you ready for the speed round?
Let's do it.
Okay, all you need is 5. Normally I would say 6, but 5, because you already got one extra credit point that you insisted I give you, and I did. Which is better, your wife Clarissa's Pinot Blanc or Viognier?
Pinot Blanc.
That is correct. UC Davis has the 3rd largest student body in the UC system. What are number 1 and number 2?
San Diego and Riverside.
Nope.
Oh.
Actually, Berkeley and UCLA. Is there still Davis in you? Bicycle, scooter, skateboard, or moped?
Bicycle.
That is correct. Maui or Kauai?
Kauai.
That is correct. Barbecue, pig or steer?
Pig.
Correct. People in Carolinas love you. Austin, not quite so much. Dry rub or saucy?
Dry rub.
That is correct. What's the highest barrel stack you feel comfortable around?
6 high.
Woo! I'm going to give you a point for that because you are brave. Better wine movie, Sideways, Bottle Shock, or French Kiss?
Bottle Shock.
You're correct. Sideways was just a movie about men behaving badly with no comeuppance. I did for Santa Barbara Pinot Noir what the Soviet Union did for socialism. Took us from feudalism to postmodernism without a damn bit of work. No, we worked for it. We worked for it. What's more important in a marriage, honesty or willingness?
Honesty.
I'll give you a point for that. I think I would have probably taken either. Bertrand Russell said the sexiest thing, there's only one thing sexy in the world, and it's willingness. So I didn't ask about sexiness. I talked about marriage, and honesty is right. The foundation of a good marriage. Szechuan or Mandarin?
Mandarin.
Okay. And Mandarin or Thai?
Thai.
Obviously some Lompoc influence. Lompoc has more Thai and Hmong restaurants than any other restaurant or city in the United States per capita.
And they're killer.
Final question, we're staying with food. Santa Barbara has some of the best Mexican in the entire world, maybe some better Mexican than a number of Mexican cities. Your favorite Mexican food in Santa Barbara, your choices are Floriano's, Lompoc, El Corazon, the public market in Santa Barbara, Super Rica, Coda and Milpas in Santa Barbara, Cielito Lindo, which is in Orcutt, which is right by my house, or El Toro Carniceria.
My daughter's gonna kill me because Cielito Lindo is her favorite, but I'm going with La Superica.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and have to give you a point for that for our wonderful friends down in Santa Barbara. An excellent place to eat and an excellent restaurant. If you've never been to Super Rica, their chili relleno, which is on special on Tuesdays and Thursdays, is one of the. If it was at a starred Michelin restaurant, you would not bat an eye. It's just that good.
Julia Childs, that's her favorite Mexican restaurant.
I got to meet Julia 2 weeks before she died at the Santa Barbara farmers market. I gave her a bottle of Clos Pepe Chardonnay, homage to Chablis, and she wrote me a handwritten letter thanking me for the wine and giving me her thoughts on the wine, which were very complimentary, which is one of the greatest treasures I have in my life.
That is cool.
It was. Any other way that we can find out about you? Any social media stuff? Follow you here, follow you there?
Follow me here. I'm my Instagram's at Nagy Wines. So,
well, we are literally right on 1 hour. Thank you so much for being here. I hope everyone had a great time. I'm going to go through and look through, make sure that we didn't miss any. I'm going to just really quick go through our friends over here on Facebook. We had Phil Carpenter and Jason Villalobos. Thank you so much.
Mark said if you ever use Terenceau for Pinot Noir, and yes, I have. Biennacido, in fact. Foxen uses Terenceau in Pinot Noir as well for Biennacido vineyard. So it can happen. It just has to be the right vineyard. Rita's Crown is another vineyard that does well with Terenceau. So that was.
I like the Terenceau barrels. I find them very respectful.
Yeah.
Respectful of terroir, and that's really kind of exactly what I'm looking for. Supposedly, our friend Jake is saying that down in the Valley de Guadalupe, which I find one of the most compelling wine regions in the world that is not given as much respect, that they do Santa Maria style barbecue down there. There's a bunch of cranking barbecues, which is fun to know. Someone asked me about why am I drinking beer? Dude, I'm a winemaker. It's a warm day. It was 73 degrees today in Santa Valley, man. It was warm. So, you know, a little, and
about how hot it is.
plus this is Central Coast beer. This is Alvarado Street Pale Ale. This is some serious stuff, but I have to say that 2018 Pinot Noir, the J. Wilkes, is just tasting juicy and delicious and wonderful. Really looking forward to working with you at the Millard Family Wine Company. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thanks, Clarissa. Thank Clarissa for everything that she does and keeping you in such beautiful shape and sharing all these wonderful things with us. Looking forward, once I'm vaccinated, once we got herd immunity, let's get together. We'll meet it down at Oliveto. Maybe have some dinner here. Love to have you guys over and get back together at table. I like to say wine is an investment to keep the people we love at table for an extra hour every day. And that's exactly what I would like to get back to, is being able to be together and not having to worry about continuing to breathe on this beautiful planet Earth. I always finish the show the same way. I say, make sure in this difficult time to find someone in your family that might need some help, in your community, and maybe someone that you don't know that might need some help within your area of living, to make sure you reach out to them tonight to make sure that they're okay. We're in a difficult time, in a difficult situation. We all need to work together to make sure we get out on the other side alive, breathing, happy, and drinking wine. Black Lives Matter. Continue to think about this, continue to think about how we're going to take the most vulnerable people in this world and the most vulnerable people in this country and start actually treating them well. The vulnerable in this country are not expendable, and we need to stop acting like they are. So let's use science, let's use rationality to push forward the idea that we are all worthy of flourishing. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank everyone for coming out tonight. I hope you had a good time, and we'll be back on Monday for Day Drinking with Wes Hagen. Check the schedule, check the calendar, and we will be back. And remember, if you're not day drinking, you are tragically sober. So thanks again. Appreciate everything you did for us, Jonathan.
Thank you, everybody. Yes.
Thanks again. All right, guys. It's in the can. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. And don't forget to come back on Monday. And thanks again. And we will post this entire show also on YouTube, on both the J. Wilkes Wines YouTube and the Miller Family Wine Company Wine. So thanks again. We'll talk to you soon. Be well. Thanks, Jonathan.